This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and finally, I know some of you have been waiting for this review for months now. This is the Lenovo Yoga 720. It's a 15.6-inch convertible. Nothing unusual about that, right? What is unusual, instead of the usual dual-core 51 Ultrabook CPUs in here, we have a quad-core CPU, 45 watts. So this is as powerful as something like the Dell XPS 15. You don't usually see that because there's just not enough room in convertible designs, and they try to make them thin and light, and the hinge area takes up space and all that. Well, it gets even better. There's optional NVIDIA GTX 1050 graphics with 2 GB of DDR4 VRAM. So that's one up on the HP Spectre X360 15-inch, which has NVIDIA 940 graphics. You know, that's a little bit more common because it's very low power kind of GPU. The 1050 is getting as serious as your entry-level gaming laptops, which we reviewed many of, and indeed this one performs just as well. But wait, there's more. It also works with the optional Lenovo pen. It's not, which isn't actually shipping yet, the Lenovo Active Stylus 2. It's going to be one of those first Wacom dual protocol pens, but this here is a Wacom AES digitizer. So the Lenovo ThinkPad pen works, any Wacom AES pen will work with it. 4,096 levels of pressure sensitivity. So yeah, here's the special thing, and those of you who've been looking for something like this know that yes, you can get a convertible in a 15-inch size, harder to do, especially if you want to find the pen, though not as common with the pen, pretty rare. And what about those of you who do like the really heavy lifting and you want that quad-core CPU and dedicated graphics, real dedicated graphics? It hasn't all come together before until now. We're going to look at it now. So the Yoga 720, well, the Yoga 700 series in general is their middle, a little bit better than middle range line. You remember the Yoga 900 series? That's the top of the line. So comparing this to the HP Spectre, which is HP's top of the line, in terms of looks, fit, and finish, isn't quite fair. This would compete more maybe with the Envy series, which is a very nice series from HP. That's not the apex of everything they can do in terms of gorgeous design. That said, it's not bad looking. It's a little bit utilitarian. Here we have our nice gray and kind of a polished edge thing. Gives it a little bit of zing there. We have a couple of interesting things, like a little curve over here. It gives the design a little bit of a look of complexity. The typical very beefy yoga hinge, so it's sturdy stuff and it's quite stiff. That stands in its favor. It's aluminum casing on it, so that's pretty premium too. You know, for something that you call their middle of the road or upper middle of the road, it's pretty nice. It's just a little, well, dull looking. If you compare it to something like the Dell XPS 15, with which in certain ways it does compete, or with the HP Spectre X360 15-inch, which is a showpiece of gorgeousness. But there's more than beauty in the world. So for those of you who know you need a quad-core CPU and the better dedicated graphics, well, you know, I would make do with the thing that isn't necessarily the prettiest on the block. It's put together pretty well. No complaints about that, no rough edges, no problem with fit and finish, nice and rigid, all the good things that you would expect for something that's in this price range. Now it starts around $999, where for that you're going to get integrated graphics only. Our model here, which is actually a middle to the lower end configuration, we have the Core i7-7700 HQ CPU, 8 GB of DDR4 RAM, a 256 gig PCIe NVMe SSD, it's a Samsung branded one, and the full HD display. And that one runs around $1,200, you know, give or take. Right now they're having some sales because it's a holiday weekend, so about $1,150, but in general call it around $1,200. If you go up to $1,500, you can get the comparable one to the HP Spectre that I just mentioned, the 15-inch one. That gets you 16 gigs of RAM, a 512 gig SSD, and the 4K display on it. So there you have it. Pretty fair pricing for what you're getting here, certainly. And this one is outfitted pretty much like a budget gaming laptop, the entry level, and is priced around the same too. But for that, you get some things that you don't get with the gaming laptop, which is particularly this and support for the pen. So for graphics, artist types, designers, that's going to be something that's really attractive. Where before you dragged around an Alienware just because you wanted the processing power or something like that, and you use an external graphics tablet, suddenly you can do the work on the device itself, which is nice, very nice. Now the keyboard, it's typical of the Yoga series. It's not my favorite. It's not terrible. The keys feel, you know, there's no wobble, there's no sponginess, nothing like that, but not too much travel, about 1.4 millimeter. It feels a little short. It's okay. It's not bad. The trackpad, which shows up as a Wacom device, which would be pretty odd. They're usually not in the business of making trackpads. I'm not sure what's going on with that, is okay. It's not my favorite. It's not hideous. It's just, you know, it's okay. I prefer the XPS 15 and the HP Spectre X360s, but it's by no means a bad trackpad. And it has just basic settings, just the Microsoft drivers there. Fingerprint scanner, conveniently located. Nice to see in a consumer model right here. And it's easy enough to use. Now, when it comes to ports on this, there's not a whole heck of a lot for a 15-inch because they had to make room for the, well, the graphics card, the extra fan, all that sort of thing. So you have the usual Lenovo rectangular power connector, and you have two USB 3.0 ports, one on each side. There is no HDMI port. There is no SD card slot. There is a headphone jack, fortunately. There is a Thunderbolt 3 port, so that could make up for the lack of an HDMI port, display port, all that sort of thing. Now here's the thing, Lenovo says it's 40 gigabyte per second, just like Dell says with the XPS 15, yet it shows up as having two PCIe lanes instead of the full 4. Does that matter? Mostly for those of you who are going to be using an external graphics amplifier like the Razer Core in the future, which I'm not sure how many people buy this kind of machine and then are dying to do that and make that additional almost $1,000 expense if you want to put a really nice graphics card in a Razer Core. So there you have it. It looks like it's only two PCIe lanes. You can still use Thunderbolt 3 docks. You can drive two 4K displays with this thing. So for most practical purposes, I think it's going to be okay. The laptop weighs 4.4 pounds, which is 2 kilograms, which, well, is just about the same thing as the HP Spectre X360 15-inch. And it's in the ballpark of the Dell XPS 15, depending on the configuration that you get. Pretty actually light for a machine with these kind of specs. It's, again, a lot lighter than your budget gaming laptop generally with these kind of specs. Of course, to use it as a tablet, it's going to be heavy. But those of us who do art, as I do, we're willing right now to make that trade-off because that added screen real estate is really nice. Same thing I said with the Spectre X360. It really opens up a whole new world of freedom when you're doing digital art drawing on the screen. Just make sure you have a nice way to support it because you're obviously not going to be holding it in one hand while you're drawing. Now, as I get into the pen stuff, I just want to point out two things. Those fashionably small bezels, though not quite as small as the Spectre X360s, can be an annoyance. I'm often actually picking this up and hitting a tool on the toolbar here in Photoshop, though these are a little bit bigger, so it's not quite so bad for accidentally doing things. And the other thing is the power button and being over here. I can't tell you how many times I pick it up to move it and I accidentally press this because this power button is not recessed and it takes a pretty light touch to activate it. So yeah, it's not a deal breaker, but it's just something to be aware of. It will annoy you until you remember to work around those little foibles. It's a good multimedia tablet. It has 2-watt stereo speakers with Dolby audio. It sounds very nice, very enjoyable for watching movies. It yogas, so it does tablet mode, it does tent mode. It has all the usual versatile stuff that you expect from a yoga design. Now let's talk about that pen for a minute. Like I said, you're not going to find many 15-inch laptops that have an active digital pen. And this one does have Wacom AES digitizer inside, and it's a good one. One of the nice things about Wacom AES, it's more affordable than EMR, so it brings down the price. It makes for a thinner glass layer on digitizer layer on the display. You don't really have parallax with it. The performance is pretty good in terms of latency. 4,096 levels of pressure sensitivity. That's currently state of the art. It's plenty enough. No tilt support here that I can see. Of course, we're still waiting for the latest generation of pen, and again, is Active Pen 2 isn't actually shipping yet. We'll soon be getting in another pen, which I can't talk about yet, that will support it, so we'll give it a try, but I suspect there won't be any tilt support here. Now moving on to the display, we have the full HD one. Some people have complained about light bleed on the IPS display. Ours really didn't have any light bleed worth speaking of. In fact, it's one of the better displays I've seen in terms of light bleed. There's a 4K option too. We don't have that. I wish we had it in-house to test because the full HD display, not that it's a bad display, it's not. It's a perfectly fine display. It just doesn't have that pop and that wow kind of look. When I look at the Spectre X360 15-inch 4K display, the vibrance, the contrast, the color saturation there look even better than the metrics suggest. It's one of my favorite actually to watch movies on as a result. Of course, with Dell XPS 15, if you go for their 4K display, you're getting very wide color gamut, Dolby RGB coverage, all that sort of thing. But their 1080p display is nothing to sneeze at. It's pretty decent on the Dell. This one here, like I said, the metrics are really quite good on it, but when I looked at it first, I actually thought that it was going to have much lower color gamut than it measured as having. It just doesn't have a vibrance or a pop to it. So, but I'm being picky because in this price range, you get to be picky with consumer laptops, $1,000 and up, you get nice displays. That said, 308 nits is pretty bright. It looked dim at first, but that's because I think they're really trying to conserve battery life here, because that's at a premium when you have this much power in a slim laptop without much room for a giant battery. So it wasn't until I hit about 90% brightness that it really started to brighten up. So it's obvious that the last two notches of brightness are really nice and bright. Everything else seems kind of dim. So it's not that it's a dim display. It's the way they have the brightness control set up on it. Color, the gamut on it is actually perfectly good. 76% of Adobe RGB, 97% of sRGB. That's good. Contrast is good. You can see the specs up on screen. Gamma's pretty decent. The white point is actually along the low side, which is unusual, and I'll take it. It's pretty close to where it should be. So viewing angles are good. You'll see some brightness shift off angle. So like I said, it's not a bad display. It just didn't wow me as much as the competition. But then again, for what you're getting in this price point, hey, it's fair. They got it. They can't give you the best of everything, or this would be a much more expensive product. And that segues into battery life. Much as I would like to test out that 4K display, and it might actually be a more beautiful and vibrant panel, the full HD is going to consume less power. We saw the same thing with the XPS 15. So there's an upside to this too, where the full HD, unless you're doing graphics art stuff and you need the higher resolution, which I have to admit is kind of the target market for a convertible with a pen, isn't it? That has a lot of horsepower in it, but there is the trade-off. Now, Lenovo claims up to 9 hours of runtime, and that's, as usual, optimistic with PC manufacturers. It has a 72 watt-hour battery. That's a pretty decent capacity, and it's impressive they squeezed it into this chassis. I'm seeing more like 6 to 7 hours of light to moderate use. Now, one thing, I was using this to draw in Photoshop. Many layers, 3000 by 2000 pixel, 300 DPI canvas, and it was running by default on integrated graphics, which the Intel HD 630 is actually enough to edit photos and to do graphic arts just fine. It's where you get into your, well, I've got 30 layers. I have something that's going to be printed billboard size. I have a 42 megapixel digital camera. Lucky me. That's when you really want to start enabling the NVIDIA dedicated graphics, which I did switch to, and I did notice that it got hotter, it got louder, the run times were shorter. So when I quote 6 to 7 hours, that's with integrated graphics. Of course, even a dual-core Ultrabook can handle Photoshop pretty well these days with integrated graphics. So what you're looking at here is working, say, in Adobe Premiere for video editing. Fantastic fit. Really, you've got the horsepower, you've got a pretty decent display on here, you've got the graphics card to boot. It's great. If you're doing ZBrush, that sort of thing, that's really when you start looking at needing that quad-core machine and the higher-end graphics. Or, gee, if you want a game, I mean, this is perfectly capable of doing Overwatch and of playing Mass Effect Andromeda on medium settings. I tried it on high, and it wasn't real great in multiplayer. About 37 frames per second was just not good for a shooting game experience there. But back to the display and battery life, if you go with the 4K display, I would expect an hour, probably 2 hours shorter runtimes. That's what we've seen on other laptops that offer both options. The Spectre X360 15-inch is one of the few exceptions. Of course, it has dual-core CPU and lower-end dedicated graphics. They can make up for the battery power there, but that one really just is the runtime champ in this category. Again, different CPU family, so not 100% fair, but for those of you who are thinking of either one, I have to mention that. So in terms of performance, it performed on benchmarks just as well as something like the Acer Aspire VX15 entry-level gaming laptop that we reviewed, the Dell Inspiron Gaming Edition. No difference, which is pretty nice. The 2 gigabyte VRAM, not so much of an issue on a 1080p display. I mean, that's enough VRAM usually for a 1080p game. It's when you're going to the higher resolutions, if you're going to use an external monitor, that you need more with today's games. And honestly, this doesn't have the horsepower to be doing 4K gaming anyway, so it's moot. So I have no issues with that. Heat and noise should be a problem, you would think, right? It's that thin. They did a very good job with the cooling system. There's 2 fans inside, as you'd expect, one for the CPU, one for the GPU. We have some rear exhaust and bottom exhaust intakes, and yes, it does get hot, and you can see the color, the FLIR pictures on the screen here, and how hot it got. And towards the middle center, top and bottom. That's the hot spot, and it gets toasty. Fortunately, neither of those locations are ones that you'll probably directly touch. Even if it's on your lap, the bottom spot is between your legs, and the other one's pretty high up on the keyboard, but it'll get toasty, and you'll certainly hear the fan, but just like with gaming laptops in this segment, not that loud, not that much heat. It's not that super powerful either, so it was tolerable. So you can see from the many benchmarks that we ran here, I've been running across the screen while you've been listening to this video, and also when playing games. I played Civ 6, I played lots of Mass Effect Andromeda on this. No throttling, no issues. And Mass Effect Andromeda, once I dropped it to medium, I was able to keep it pretty close to 60 frames per second, as you can see, which is very playable. So gosh, a convertible Ultrabook with a pen, and it plays games? Not bad. Opening this up is pretty easy. Here's the aluminum bottom cover. There's Torx T5 screws that are readily visible. Nothing is hidden here, and one in the center too. The ones at the back are longer, so remember that when you put it back together again. So the underside of the cover looks like a little dust cover here for the grill. And there we have the internals. You got your speakers over here. Here's your 72 watt-hour battery. 2 fans, one for the CPU, one for the GPU. Our socketed Intel 8265 AC Wi-Fi card is there. M2 SSD, again, we have a Samsung PCIe NVMe SSD in there. And so how about RAM? Well, as it turns out, this is a RAM cover. Some laptops have it. This is a great way to chip your fingernails if you have fingernails. You pry that off, and there's a RAM slot. Now, we have the 8 gig of DDR4 RAM version of this. So obviously there's a slot here, and you could put another 8 gig in, then end up with dual channel 16 gigs of RAM, which Lenovo also sells. You can get it with 8 or 16. Now, what if you want to go up to an oddball 24 gigs? Because that would be possible with the 16 gig module. Here's a module I have right here. It's a Viper. It's slightly high performance. It's got little heat sinks on here, and it's a little too thick to go in there, which doesn't happen that often, but it won't go in and actually clamp in. So you're going to have to, this is a double-sided module. We got chips on both sides, which is pretty common with 16 gigs. So you'd have to find one that's thin enough if you wanted to go up to 24 gigs of RAM. Probably most people aren't going to do that anyway. So there you have it. There are the internals. So that's the Lenovo Yoga 720 available now. Again, I think, I would recommend getting the one with the GTX 1050 because why not go for what's special here? And it's not much more money than the one without that, but again, it is available with just the integrated graphics if you want. It pulls together a lot of special things, like I said, we haven't seen before. You've got pretty decent dedicated graphics here. You have a quad-core CPU, yet this is a convertible design that's actually not that heavy and not that thick. Battery life, well, you can't expect great things in that department from something with this kind of horsepower inside, but with the full HD display like we have, the battery life actually isn't that bad. I mean, 6 to 7 hours of usable light to moderate use time is decent, especially given what it gives you in return. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this video.